All right, so we're going to do a quick crash course, and this is going to be to help get people up and running if you had a break between semesters. And sometimes we end up taking courses that are out of sequence. So you might jump into a class like this and you haven't had any previous game development experience, or you needed to graduate or what have you. So what I'm doing is during this first week of lesson, we're going to do a quick crash course on Unity basics to refresh our memory, as I said. And overall, just to get us comfortable with where we're going next, which is creating an RPG, which actually I make here in the next set of tutorials, RPG Land. I'm going to keep this one basic for coding concepts, and then in the actual RPG Land tutorial, I'm going to go a little bit more advanced so that we keep pushing your programming skills. Coding is learning a language, is where they call it a programming language. So always know that you always have to kind of research or go back or refresh your memory if you're learning a new language. And, imagine you're going to another country and you need to practice that language as well so you can talk to other people. So it's not just something that you can do once and then you're like, okay, I remember it for life. So don't ever get worried if you get bugs in your code. Doesn't mean you're a bad engineer or this isn't for you. It just means you need more practice. All right, so let's go ahead and go to new project. And I'm going to use Unity version control. You can leave that checked off if you don't have that stuff installed. And for now, I'm going to do 2D URP core. You might have to install something if it prompts you, but just do crash course RPG. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit create project. All right, so let's go ahead and start with, stuff that we know that we're going to need. So in our assets folder here, I'm going to create a folder and I'm going to put in underscore scripts here. And inside of this, I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a C# script, and I'm going to name this main menu. Now let's go ahead and create our main menu. So I'm going to right click inside of our hierarchy here. Now I'm anticipating some basic familiarity with Unity interface and things. I tend to overly review things anyway, so if you miss something, I'll probably talk about it later. You can also set up an appointment with me and I'll go through with you one-on-one. But let's go ahead and create 3 buttons. So I'm going to right click in here, I'm going to go to UI, and I want to make a button. And I notice at the end of this button it says TextMesh Pro. If you have a newer version of Unity, it uses TextMesh Pro, which is a much more robust text system. Now I accidentally clicked drop down. It doesn't matter. If you selected button, it's good. What you need to do is click on Import TMP Essentials in order to get your text to show up properly inside of here. You don't need to import the examples unless you want to see how they do pretty cool stuff. I'm going to go ahead and delete this again. You'll see though, when I created that dropdown, it made a canvas for me. This is where you put all of your UI elements. And it also created an event system. An event system is what keeps track of the different button clicks and things that happen to that system. Now, if you select your canvas here and you hit F to focus, F like Frank, you can see that it gave me a basic blockout that looks like my stretched out monitor here. We generally want to, in our game view, and I'm going to dock this next to it for a moment, we want to make this really whatever we think our final game might look like. So that's 16 by 9. You could do 1920 by 1080, which is good, and you'll see that it adjusts the size to that here. Now our game view here is all blue because we don't have any elements in there. And what I mean by that is I want to create buttons. So I'm going to right click on my canvas here. Again, go to UI and then just do button. And this is our first button. Now, something that's interesting is I'm just zooming out here. Notice as I scale this up and down, what I'd like to do is here's my button here. Now for our main menu, let's make this let's do 3, 3, and 3. And what I'd like to do is just kind of make 3 buttons. So let's go ahead and select our move tool here or hit W. And I'm going to move this to the top here. And I'm going to just play with scaling this here. You can see that button scales with my UI, which is nice. Generally, what I like to do is under canvas here, where it says constant pixel size, I usually like to do scale with screen size. And the reason for this is because anything now that I put on this canvas, as I'm scaling it, it'll shrink it or expand it, and it'll keep it all relatively the same. Now, for this button, I'm just going to call this start game. And then I can do underscore BTN. And I'm going to hit Control A to copy that and Control C to paste it, or Control A to select all and then Control C to copy. So Control A selects all, then Control C to copy, because I'm going to make a couple of these. And then under text here, I'm just going to bring this down. And under this Text Mesh Pro section, I'm just going to put start. Now, the next thing I generally like to have is I'd like to have a settings section. So I'm going to hit Control D here and move this down. And I'm just going to name this settings button. Now, the reason I did the copy earlier was the cleaner way of doing this is not to copy, because you can copy some of the same parameters over. You actually just want to go in and do UI and then do button. And but we don't have any extra scripts or weirdness going on, so it's okay to hit Control D to duplicate. And then inside of this one, we're just going to do quick game. And it's quick game button. Let's get rid of that one at the end. And then let's just go expand this, and then under text here, do quit. Now for quit, let's move this all the way down here. Oops, we want to do the button, not the text. Notice that I had the text below selected. And let's move that down. And then for settings here, it looks like I did not change the text on that button. So let's go ahead and expand this and do settings. And let's move this in the middle here. Now what's cool is, come on, here we go. Looks like I was grabbing my canvas. Is if you press play now, you could see that there's all these parameters on the different buttons. So for example, here's start game. If I click on it, you can see it changes color. I can actually do a highlight color. So let's say I want to go red. And as I, actually, let's see. Let's see what we got here. Disabled color, settings color. Disabled color is pretty cool, because if I have it where I script it so these are disabled, I can make it look disabled, like grayed out. But highlight color, let's see, there we go. I clicked it and it updated. So now when I go over that button, it turns red. So maybe like if it's a fun poppy game, you can have your highlight color be green. Now notice, I want you to notice something. Look at this color when I uncheck play. You can see it returns to all white. Changes made in play mode don't necessarily stick. Okay, now something else you want to do is you want to go to edit and you want to go to project settings here. And inside your project settings, you want to, actually let's start with preferences first. Let's go to edit and then do preferences here. Now, let's expand this. You'll find a little section in the center that says external tools. Now, many of you installed Visual Studio and all this other stuff. You want to make sure that yours either has Writer or Visual Studio in there, depending on what IDE you installed. Right out of the box when you're installing Unity, it prompts you to install Visual Studio, not Visual Studio Code. You want to select it here, because if you go in and you try to open your scripts now and you install Visual Studio Code, you're not going to get any context opening up. Context being like when you type things, it helps you finish the code. Another thing we want to do is, let's see here. Let's go to project settings. Is we want to turn off this inside of editor here. We want to check on enter play mode, and we want to leave these turned off. The reason for this is if you have reload domain on, every time you press play, it's going to prompt you. You're going to get a little box that pops up that says that's reloading domain. If you use any kind of static variables, for those of you who have any coding experience, if you do what I just did, you might have some compilation errors. But for now, we're not going to be doing a lot of that. And I'm going to show you ways to work around it. So let's go back in our assets folder here. Let's go create another folder, and let's just call this scenes. And for now, I think this is a pretty good UI. Now, we don't have any artwork in the background, but again, this is just a really basic game here. But what I want to do in this scenes folder, it looks like we already had one. I'm sorry, by default, so I'm going to delete that, is I want to save this as main menu. So go to File and then do Save As. And you'll see it doesn't take you directly into that scenes folder. So we have to go inside of here. And we're just going to name this main menu. Now, another way to create scenes is I can right-click in here and then go to Create. And I could just go down to Scene. And we're just going to call this Level and then 0, 1. Now, what I'd like to do later is, and actually, let's just knock it out. I'm going to go ahead and double click this script, and then I'm going to do a pause the video and set up my IDE so it's docked on the right side of my screen, and then here's my left side. Right, so what we have going on here is, if I select my start game button here, you're going to see that there's a section down below that just says on click, and that's located within this button section here. And this is a way of registering. Like if I hit plus here, I can actually call things called methods, which are these right here, when I click on this option or this button. So here's my start game button. So I'm going to right click in here and I'm going to create an empty game object. And this is really just a object that has really no components aside from a transform here. And I'm going to call this UI manager. Now I'm going to grab my main menu script and just drop it on there. And inside of here, let's go ahead and delete these default ones that we have going on here. And I'm going to create a method, and it's going to be public because we want to be able to access it outside of the script, and void because we're not going to be doing any compilation, and it's called start game. Now, what I'd like to do, and it's going to require me to use something, a library that exists inside of Unity called scene management. And inside of this, what I want to do is when I call this method, this start game method, is I'd like it to load my scene. But before I show you that code, I want to show you something. It's called debug. It's some predefined code by Unity called debug.log that's used for testing. So for example, I want to test that if I click this button, that this method is called. So I'm going to say called button, and I'm going to hit Control S to save this. Now inside of my UI manager that has this script here, notice that it really doesn't look unchanged after I saved it. Like you can't see anything here. But if you click on main menu here, there's a couple ways of checking that this code's saved. Notice that the code is inside of here, and also the asterisk is missing up here. Now, what we can do is we can actually, inside of our start game button here, remember we clicked plus here? We can add a plus, and what we can do is grab that UI manager that has this script on it, and we could say, remember this method is called start game. I can say, hey, on this UI manager, there's a script called main menu. And what I'd like to do is when I click this button, see it says on click, I would like to go to my main menu script that was attached to it, and I'd like to call this start game method. That's this one right here. So this little code that's used for checking, what it does really is all it does is it prints to the console here to test things. We could test like what's saved in variables, and we'll be using it a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and press play. And notice we have nothing going on, but you want to make sure these are all lightly grayed because that means that it's ticked on. When I click start, notice it said called button. And I click it again, and every time I click it, it keeps calling the start game method. Now, in this scene that we created earlier, I'm going to go ahead and hit Control S to save the work we did. When I go inside here, notice it's just blue. So this is how we're going to check to see that the next line of code that we do, if it works. So I'm going to delete this sample scene too. We don't need that. Let's go back to main menu here for a moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some predefined code that was created by Unity that's located in scene management. Something that you need to understand is you're going to be using a lot of libraries and APIs and also the good stuff that is all predefined code. And you don't necessarily have to write everything from scratch, and nor do you want to. It's just too much for one person or one little team to do. You want to get your idea and your game out as fast as possible. So inside of this library of scripts, there's a command, and it's scene manager dot, and then we can call this method here load scene. And the scene that I want to load is level 01. So I'm going to click on that. You could type it out too. And inside of quotes, I'm just going to paste this in there. And it looks like it found it for me, which is nice. And I'm going to save this. Now, just to really prove to you that this works, I'm going to go inside of level one. I'm going to right click and go to UI. I'm just going to do Text Mesh Pro here. And I'm just going to expand that font size a lot. And let's also kind of increase the rect transform here on this. Let's move this over to the side here. And something like that. And you'll notice, there we go, that the text wasn't updating just like it did in the other scene, and that's because we had done on our canvas, we had selected our scalar size and we made it scale with screen size. So now it acts a little bit differently. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save level 01 here, and I'm going to go back to my main menu. And now when I press play, let's test that this code works. Now, Remember I told you before you have to make sure that that says Visual Studio. If yours did not show any sort of auto creation process, population, like when you click Scene Manager and you hit dot and nothing popped up here, you have to make sure again that you had set up your Visual Studio correctly in those project settings. But anyway, back to here. When I press play, it's going to call this method, and I want it to call this command here. And it's not working. So let's go ahead and hit Control S to save this. Let's see what's going on. So, and down here it says, Level 01 cannot be loaded because it has not been added to the build settings or the asset bundle and has not been loaded. So what's nice is, and I'm going to close this out for a minute, is inside your console, not only is it used for printing out things that we need, but it also tells you if something is wrong in your game. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to go to edit and I'm going to go to build settings. Let's see, it says build settings in your asset bundle, and it goes file build settings. Notice I went to edit, I should have went to file. So it's actually telling you where to go to get help. Now this isn't perfect. And it says scene levels 01 could not be loaded because it's not been added to build settings. So here's my build settings. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to grab level 01. I'm going to drop it inside of here. I'm also going to drop my main menu in here just because all the scenes I plan to build in my final game should be inside of here. And you can see here's the list of all of the different things you could build, PS4, PS5, all that stuff. So let's go ahead and close that. Let's press play and let's see, yep, it cleared the error out. Let's close this and let's press start. Now you can see it loaded level 01. So really basic main menu here. Now we do lots of main menus in other classes, so I'm not going to create the settings and quit. You know what, I'll show you how to create the quick game because it's pretty easy. So I'm just going to highlight all of this, hit Control D, and I'll name this quick game because I don't think we do any quick games in other classes. Maybe we do, but just to kind of show you that. And we can attach, if we go to our canvas here, and we go to quick game button. I'm going to press plus here. I can grab my UI manager, drop it in there, no function, main menu. Here is that quick game that we just created. And all we have to do inside of here to get it to quit is you just do application.quit. Again, pre-made code. And so if somebody clicks quit, it'll kick them out of the game if it's a build on Windows or Mac. All right, so now what we can do is we've got a menu. Let's go into level 01, and I'm going to go ahead and save that scene. And inside of scripts here, I'm going to go ahead and create another C# script, and we're just going to call this player movement. All right, so let's go ahead and get a player to put in our game. So I'm going to go to window here, and I'm going to click on general, and I'm going to click on, let's see. Oh, it's right up here. Sorry, asset store. It used to be under general. Asset store, and that'll open this tab here. And what we're going to do is click on search online. All right, so that opens up your asset store. And to save a little bit of time, I typed in top-down adventure asset, and I think this is a pretty good asset to have. I also checked on free assets. If you leave that off, you'll have a few other elements in here. I just want this free one. And for now, this is good enough to use because it has some basic player movement that we're going to use, and it has some basic assets that we can also use in our game to make a world for our adventure game. So I'm going to go ahead and click add to my assets, and I'm going to sign in. And once I sign in, it gives me the option to click on add to my assets again. I hit accept, and then it'll say open in Unity. And as long as you have your project open, you can go to open in Unity, and you can see now it'll open your package manager, and it'll add it to your list of assets in my assets here. I'm going to go ahead and hit download. And then once it's finished downloading, you'll get an import button. Go ahead and hit import here. And I'm going to just import the music and everything. We're going to use that in our game. All right, let's go ahead and close this. And I'm going to expand this. And I'm going to right click and just close this tab. Now down at here, you'll see there's top-down adventure assets, scenes, sounds, visuals, things like that. I'm just going to rename this top-down adventure assets to art because it does a pretty good job of breaking up the things I need in my art folder, like sounds and visuals, like characters, environments, stuff like that. And I think that's a pretty good way of doing it. I'm going to delete this text here for level 01, but I'm going to leave my canvas because I'll probably need it to create the HUD, the player health in our scene. Now inside of visuals, let's look at characters here. There's NPC, which is kind of cool that they give us this. So there's like a dog here, and it's pretty tiny, and you could see it in correlation to our camera. Gonna have to zoom in a lot to see this here. So I might expand these up quite a bit because you can see at 1920 by 1080, it's really just a dot here. And let's see, we have a girl. Let's see what that looks like here. And maybe we'll expand that like by 10. Yeah, not bad. And it doesn't look like, let's see, here's 2. Let's delete that. And let's leave that one big, and we'll do this as 10, 10, 10, 10. And it might be just a very basic animation here. So let's hit F to focus, and I'm gonna hit W and move it over. Yeah, it looks like it's just that foot moves from left to right, and they just kind of flip the whole image. And that gives the impression that our character is walking. Here, I'll show you what I mean by that. So here's this 1 here. If I flip on X, it makes it look like it's walking. See, they just kind of flip the image. And that's a nice trick for making something look like it's walking. But right now, we're interested in player movement. So let's go ahead and, in our characters here, let's go to player, and this is our hero. Now you can see here, our hero character has all of these different images that it cycles on. So as I click on it, you can kind of see it here. It goes in each direction. And so we're going to talk about animation and how to script animation in another video. But for now, we're just going to create our player character. So I'm going to drag Hero 1 and drop it in our scene. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to leave this kind of like my art layer here, but I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to create an empty parent. So Hero 1 went underneath here. And I'm going to call this Night. And then this, I'll go ahead and just leave it as 111, but the hero underneath it, this is where I'll kind of fiddle with the scale. So here's size 10, and I'm going to dock this next to it. And that's pretty big, but you know what? It's totally cool in my book to have it, let's see. The scale is kind of weird, but big is because I like seeing my character. I like seeing the interaction. And if we build out a dialogue system, it'll be kind of neat too. All right, so let's go ahead and drag on our Night, the highest level here. I'm going to go ahead and drag player movement on there. And I'm going to open this script and do the side-by-side like I did with the main menu. All right, so at the top here, I want to create some variables here. And inside of these variables, they're going to control, really at the current moment, it's really just going to control the player's movement. So this isn't like an attack script or anything like that. So let me go ahead and pause the video and add those variables. All right, so what we have going on here is we have a variable called move speed, and we set it to 5. We're going to be using this to control how fast our player moves around our map. Now, this is important to note the speed because by default, whenever you script something in Unity, it has a default speed or time. And with that, you want to be able to multiply that times some additional value. And that value is what's going to help move this along. Now notice that I made this variable public. The reason for that is if I'm the programmer or main designer, but I have another person on the team, by making a variable public, I'm going to hit Control S here, you can see it exposes it in the editor. So I just made it private and it took it away. I'm going to hit Control Z, and I'm going to hit Control S to save that, and it makes it public. Now there is something generally, if this move speed is not going to be accessed outside of this, you would use something called the serialized field, but I want to keep this very basic and not confuse you too much. Now, start is called it's called, as it says here, before the first frame is updated. Oh, you know what? Let me go through this too. So private rigid body, this is how we have physics on our character. So I'm going to select my Night here, and I'm going to add a rigid body 2D because it's a 2D game. Now watch what happens to my character when I press play here. He falls through the map, and that's because we added physics there. What I generally like to do is make my gravity scale 0. Let me press play. You can see it's 0. And just overall, what I'll do is under my constraint here is I'll freeze rotation. The reason for that is when my character bumps into an object when I script it, I don't want it to rotate. And what this does is this locks its rotation on Z, which is this right here, so that he doesn't keep rotating. And the only way I want him to rotate is if I do that through animation or code. Now this is kind of weird. It says private vector 2 movement. What does that mean? A vector 1, right, or a float value is essentially a single value. So right now you can think of this as a float or vector 1 as we are at position X. Now my character's pivot point is at 0, 0, 0. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this for a moment to take a look at this. Notice that our entire game world is on a Cartesian graph. This being 0, 0, 0 in our world. How do I know that? It says 0, 0, 0 here. Now let's say I want to move to position X, right? I want to move him position X, which is 1. Notice it moved him one element or one line here in my Cartesian graph. Now if I want to go positive Y and I add a 1 here, notice it moved that pivot point of my player to 1, 1. Now if I want my character here, and actually let's put these back to 0. So I should be transforming only at the highest level where it says the rigid body here. Let's say I want my character to be positive 1, but I want it to move negative in that value. So I make this minus 1. Notice it moves it this way. Now, the reason why I'm going over this really basic math is not to teach you how to do Cartesian math inside of this or how the Cartesian graph works. It's just to show you, because we're going to be doing a lot with 2D vectors. So a 2D vector is like me saying a one-dimensional vector is just saying, hey, this value in X is 1. But the second value, this vector 2, is like saying 1, 1. And what we can store in here is our movement. Is I could say, hey, I want my character to move in 1, 1. And it'll move in that direction at an angle. So I'm putting in this movement vector. So I can go between two vectors or 2 points. And this is how you make your character move around your map. Not just your character, but your enemies, your projectiles, things like that. Now, this rigid body here, what I'd like to do is... and actually something else we need is we do need a collision object so that our characters don't walk into other, it bumps into other objects, we can stop it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a circle collider 2D. And I want this to be roughly the size of my little knight guy here. So we'll do something like this. All right, now let's make this public. Just for now, let's make all of these public so you can see them coding in real time. All right, so we have our knight selected. You can see we have movement X and Y, right? We did a 2D vector here. So we have our X and Y exposed, and we have a rigid body here. Notice it says none here. So when I press play, there is no rigid body here. And I want to get access to this because we're going to be coding the player's movement through the rigid body. So I'm going to pause the video, and inside of here, I'm going to type in some code in the start method. All right, so inside of here, what I did is I typed in this single line of code inside of start. What's nice about this is we have this script attached to our knight. And inside of this script, we have a start method. Now this method is created by Unity, and all it says is it is called before the first frame in update. So that means when I press play, this is called immediately as long as this knight is in our game and it has this script attached to it. And what it's going to do is we're going to store in this rigid body variable, we're going to grab the component, which is the rigid body 2D, and we're just going to store it inside of store a reference inside of this variable so that we can use it later. And we're going to use it to move our character around. Now watch this in action. I'm going to expand this a little bit more here. And I'm going to press play. And notice what it did. It grabbed this component. But where did it grab the rigid body 2D? From our knight. And because this component is attached, it plugged it inside of there for us. Alternatively, you could grab your rigid body component and drop it in there. But the problem with that is if you create it as a prefab or you do anything else, oftentimes it'll break that connection. So that's why you have to do this as just the safe gap to make sure that it always grabs this component and it loads it in there for you. Now, our update method runs every frame. So I'm going to just type the word print here for a moment. This is sort of like a cheaper debug.log. I'm going to say I am in update. And then I'm going to do I'll create a variable, let's see, integer I equals 0. Actually, we don't even need this because we're going to see update run. It's going to give us something to show. So update is called once per frame. This is kind of nebulous because if we look at our stats here, I'm going to go ahead and dock this to give myself a little bit of room here. And I click stats here. If I press play, you can see my frame rate is like 600 frames a second. So what that means is this method itself by default, and this is a powerful method, and you'll see it used quite a bit in other tutorials or stuff. It's going to call this between 500 to 600 times every frame. So I'm going to hit Control, Shift, and C, or you can hit Window and I believe it's under General Console. And I'm going to clear this out. Now it's set to collapse because I want, if we leave it, if I press play now, it's going to like just stack them. I'm going to hit collapse here because it's the same method running over again. And you can see this method was called like 3,000 times. So when is a good time to use this? Well, what I'd like to do is I would like to set the player's movement, right? This vector 2 movement to a certain value every single frame, or I'd like to check that something is happening. So if we go to edit and we go to project settings here, what I'd like to do essentially is, I think it's not project settings, sorry, I think it's preferences. So edit and then preferences here is, no, it is project settings. Sorry, I had to pause the video to refresh my memory. Under input manager here, I'm going to open up these axes here, and you can see that there is a horizontal and then there is a vertical. Now horizontal is mapped to, these are another set that are mapped to a joystick. You'll see there's two sets. These are mapped for a joystick and these are mapped to a keys. Now this is Unity's old implementation system, but I want to show it to you here to give you a good grounding when we actually program our other game and we use the new input system. Now I tend to use this as for prototyping, and then I'll put in the new input system when I'm starting to refine or build out a game. So right now what we're doing is we're getting a refresher and we're also just prototyping out a game, and then we're going to build a much more advanced version of this. Now, you can see here the negative buttons are my left arrow key, my right arrow key, my A and D, and this is just, all this horizontal is doing is it's giving me access to these keys, and when I press them, it's going to add those values. It's going to update those values in my scene. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So inside of here, I'm going to grab this movement here, and you're going to see this update because we expose these variables. So I'm going to say movement dot x equals input. And this is just, remember we saw that input system? This is going to give me access to that dot get access raw. And then I'm going to put in horizontal here. And that's that keyword. Let me bring that. I should have left that up. So project settings, here's my input manager. Here's this horizontal keyword. And what that's going to say is, hey, in movement.x, I'm going to store my A and D keys. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control D here. And remember, we have an X, that our character's X axis, which moves them left and right, which is the reason why I want to use my A and D key. And then we have our Y axis here, which is stored under this vertical keyword, and that is our S and W. So I'm going to just grab this word vertical here, and so I'm being a little bit of a lazy programmer, and I want to say vertical is the Y axis. So I've got this Y axis here. Now watch what happens. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to press play, and just watch this X axis movement here. As I press the A key, it goes to -1. As I push the D key, it goes to +1. So I am now adding and subtracting values. Now, if I push the W key, you can see that it's Y is positive. If I push the S key, it's negative. Now, if you change this to get access, watch what happens to those values. I'm going to save this. I'm going to press play. Notice it increments it as a float value, which means a decimal. So it builds up to that 1. It's not a sharp 0 or 1. Now this is interesting. Now I'm pressing D here. You can see it's going positive. I'm pushing W. It's going from 0 point whatever all the way up to 1. This is important, the difference between get access and get access raw. If you want your game to have sort of a smooth transition when the player pushes the movement, you use get access. If you want them to be very, like most 2D games, you just push the button and the character just starts moving, you use get access raw. I'll leave it up to you for what you'd like to test. And I like get access raw for my 2D game. Some people like it. Like for my 3D games, I like to use get access. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just highlight all of this and just hit Control D, but I'm going to delete these inside of here. Now, I'm going to change update here. Now, you can't have two methods with the same name. You can under certain circumstances, but we're going to talk about that in more advanced stuff. But there's another function called fixed update. Now, fixed update is great to use with any sort of physics stuff. It also gives us a fixed update frame rate between frames. We're not going to really get into that now. Again, I want to keep this basic, otherwise it's going to sound like word salad. So our physics system here has something called move position. And what's cool about this is it has if we type in a value here, right? So we can say, okay, move position here equals the rigid body's current position. So that means it's currently set to 0, 0, 0. So let's go ahead and add that as the first line. And then we're going to add that to movement, which is a vector 2. Remember, as I push those keys, the X and Y are being updated. And I'm going to hit Control S to save this. And then you're going to see the reason in a moment why we're going to be using movement. We have this public movement speed. So I'm going to go ahead and go to game view here. I'm going to press play. Now I'm going to use the physics to move the position. Remember, this is built into this rigid body component. Notice how fast my character goes, right? I don't have much control, right? It's just kind of set to this position plus the movement that we enter here. Okay, so what is something we can do? Well, we're also getting some really crazy, notice that frame rate, our character's like ghosting. What we want to do is we want to fix time. So we're going to use something called time.fixed delta time. And I'm going to hit Control S to save this, and I'm going to press play now. And you'll see it's going to normalize the speed in which my player moves. But there's also a problem here as I'm moving my character around. My character is moving insanely slow. How do we speed that up? Well, I'm going to grab my move speed variable here, and I'm just going to put another asterisk in here, and I'm going to paste that, and I'm going to hit Control S to save this. Now, I'm going to move this to the next line just so you could see it, and as long as you have this semicolon here, you can kind of break this line up any way you want. Like you can say, okay, I want this down here, but I'm just going to do this behind here just so you guys can see it. Let's make sure I don't add any extra unneeded code there. And I'm going to save this. And now when I press play, my move speed is set to 5. You can see I got a lot smoother movement. I can also adjust this so my character is slower or faster. All right, let's go ahead and save this. And that is the end of this player movement section. What we'll do in the next video is we'll take a look at how we can create some animations. All right, now that we have a character walking around, which is really, really cool, let's take a look at how we can do some animations. So I have my player movement script here, and I have my animator here. And generally, I would just build out another animation script, but I want to give you guys a good brief overview before we get into advanced concepts later. So we're just going to add the animation stuff inside this player movement script here. So if we go back here, remember we created an empty game object here. And we have our player movement script here, our rigid body, and our collider. What I'd like to do is start setting up some of these animations. Now, let me maximize this actually again. And let's just do layout here and do 2x3, just so we're looking at the same thing. And then let's just edit our interface so that we're both looking at the same thing. So I'm going to go to Window, and I'm going to go to Animation here, hit Animation. I'm going to dock that at the bottom. I'm going to dock my project underneath my hierarchy, giving us more room. And I'm also going to need my animator. So Window, Animation, Animator. Now this interface here, I have it saved. So you can go to Save Layout here. I have it saved as EXO. So when I click on it, it's always here, the same interface. Something else is I really want this to be one column. I'm not sure if that saves. So I'm just going to make sure that I go here and do Save Layout. All right, let's go back to our scene view for a moment. And let's take a look at setting up our animations. So down here in the project tab, we have all these visuals. We have this visuals folder. I'm going to go to characters, player. And actually inside this player folder, I'm going to create another folder. I'm going to call this anim, just short for animations. Now inside of here, let's expand this out again. We want to make sure that we select Hero 1 because this is what has our sprite render on there. And that's what we're going to be using to flip between the different images of our knight here. So again, make sure you're selecting Hero 1 here. And And I'm just going to hit create here, and I'm going to create my first animation. So under assets here, art, visuals, in this animation, characters, player, there we go, anims folder. I'm just going to make a folder called idle. Now it's hard to see these images. They're pretty tiny. You can see as I drag this up, it's really hard to kind of, as I flip through them, to see what they are. So what I'm going to do inside of this idle state is I'm just going to hold shift and select all of them. And I'm just going to drag them inside of here. And if you expand this little arrow here, you should be able to see them. So this is essentially frame 0 or frame 1 here. And let's see, we cycle through this. So this is like kind of an up walk, I guess, sidewalk, down. So these are just the first 4 are just the different views. And then we have, looks like 1, 2, 3, we have frame 4 and 4, 5, 6 are our, oh, those are like our kind of walk at an angle. It's kind of a weird. So frame 1, 2, 3, 4 here, and frame 6 are really our walk down. And then we have a pretty long walk left, which is, looks like it's frame 8. So let's go ahead and start naming these. So this first one is like look down. So I'll just do a hard press here. Name this look down. And then the second one is like look up. So LU. And then this next one is LL, look left. Let's go to the next one. I'm assuming this is a walk. This is part of the walk, I guess. So we'll do walk down, or yeah, walk down, or 0, 1 walk down. I'm just going to copy that name. And then I'm assuming this is 0, 2 walk down. And then 3 walk down. Oops. This is probably the last one. Then I'm going to set, I guess, heroes 8, 9, 10, and 11. Yeah, 8, 9, 9. So 8 through 11 is 0, 1, walk left. Actually, we might want to do it this way because I feel like it's going to label all the walk lefts together. If I make it a 0, 1, it's going to put it 0, 1, WL there. So I'm just going to just grab this, copy that, and then just do it this way. 0, 2, yeah. So now it's going to group those. And then we have the last remaining ones are walk ups. So, excuse me. So I'm going to do walk up 0, 1, hit 8, control A to copy that. 2. So you're going to have to kind of, I mean, it's a good example of us trying this out because, or doing it this way. And I know it's a little long, I'm sorry. Anyway, let's grab all these and delete them. We only need really a single frame or starting point for our character to be in. So we're going to go with that. And it's already idle. So I'm going to hit Control S there. So let's go and do our walk down. So that's really these 4. So I'm going to go to create new clip. And I'm going to just name this walk D. Grab these 4 here. And let's see if I was correct. Okay, so let's also go here and make sure sampling is on. And let's just make it like 6 frames. And then we could just kind of space this out a little bit here. Here's frame 4. And then when I play this, yeah, that doesn't look bad. We do want it to loop. So let's grab this first frame, Control C, click on 5 and paste it. Actually, you know what? That might just loop on its own. Let's see how that looks. Doesn't look too bad. Honestly, I don't even know if I like these in there. I might delete this out. And if we change this to like 4 frames a second, what if we do like 2 frames a second? And we just delete this looping frame. Yeah, there we go. I mean, that's good enough for me. All right, I'm going to go ahead and make a new clip here. I'm going to select walk D. I'm going to name this walk U, or I can just write walk up, but not be so lazy. Same thing as before. I'll make it 2 frames a second. And this is our walk up, so let's grab these 4 and see how they look. Drop those in. We have this. Yeah, I don't like these weird ones. So let's get rid of these 2. Just going to click on it and delete it, and then I'm going to grab this. There's our walk up. Unless those were the better ones. Am I selecting the... Well, let's play it. Let's see how it looks. That doesn't look bad. All right, I'm going to save that. And let's go to walk left. And as I'm doing this, by the way, notice here's my animation controller here. And if I select hero, that's what this animator is here. And it's automatically creating these. So like, let me dock this over here for a second to show you. Sorry, I should have been showing you that from the beginning. But watch this. As I create a new clip, so I'm going to do the walk left clip. So walk left. You can see it created a walk left here. And now I can just grab these 4 walk left images, drop them in here, change my frame rate to 2 frames a second, press play. And that looks pretty cool. And then just go to create new clip. You'll see it show up down here. Select walk left and just rename it walk right. All right, now in this thing, this state machine, you're going to be creating a blend tree later, like in the more advanced tutorial. But in here, we're just going to play with figuring out how to switch between these. So idle being our main parameter here. So we have to finish walk right, which is walk up, walk down. Do I not have a walk right? That's interesting. I guess he didn't put a walk right in here. Walk up, walk left, left up, left down, left down. Wow, why is there no walk right? I could duplicate these and just flip the images in Photoshop. Actually, is this a walk? What is this? This is walk up, I think, right? Let's see. Make this 2 frames a second again. Holding control again and scrolling that wheel in. Yeah, this is all walk down. I think there is a walk right in here somewhere. Let's see. Left down, left, left, left up. Yeah, why is there no... Why did he remove all the walk rights? All right, so what I'm thinking is I might do something creatively like just adjust the scale. So let me go ahead and grab all these walk lefts and just drop them in here. And then what I can do is something like this. So notice when I press play, my character's walking left. And you'll notice my hero has a scale here. So what I could probably do is when my character is walking right, let's see, here's my scale. If I make this -1 here, the scale, I'm essentially flipping it. Now you didn't see anything, notice anything different, but inside of here, when I go to walk right now and I press play, it looks like my character's walking right. Now, this is kind of a hack. You really should just have good artwork set up. And I didn't realize when we started this tutorial that wouldn't have that. I thought it looked like it had it. So anyway, I'll show you that. It'll be very basic code to do something like that. All right, so let's go ahead and update our script here. All right, so I went ahead and added this line right now, which is a public animator. And you can see now it added that to our knight. Now there's a problem with this. Notice if I do a RB, like this same thing as here where I do like get component. So let me go ahead and hit Control D to duplicate this. I'm just gonna grab this animator here, paste it in here, and say that component I want to get is animator. If I save this, we're gonna get an error. So let me show you what that error is. Notice we don't have the animator component here, but we have the animator component here. So when I press play, I get this null reference exception error. Or actually, I don't even get that at all because I'm not using this just yet. But I'm very surprised that I didn't get anything. But notice that it says none here, even though we have an animator component on our character here. So how do we get this? Well, the way you do it is we don't use get component here. We use something called get component in children. And the component I want to get is this animator component. Now when I save this, watch what happens when I press play in this animator component here. It found it under hero. See that it said the name hero here? Hero, and it said there's an animator there. And now we could see that it's firing off on idle. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a little bit more setup here. All right, I'm going to update my update method here. All right, now what's happening here? If our animator here, that's this parameter here, is not equal to null. That means that when we have a null reference here, it means that there's nothing plugged into this slot. So if we have an animator, which we know it's going to plug in an animator because we wrote this code earlier, what we want to do is we want to say animator dot set float. And let me go ahead and expand out this animator for a second. We want to say animator, so that's this animator here, dot set float. So let's make a parameter, and we're going to make a float parameter here. And the name of this is going to be moveX. Now, we start off on idle, and we have this walk left and we have this walk right. Okay, so let's start with walk left because we know that one is actually kind of working. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to make a transition here. And on this line here, we want to transition, and I want to do this immediately. So I'm going to turn off has exit time. And it says list is empty. So it says move X is, I want to hit turn that on. And we're going to say, if we have any kind of movement here in the X axis, we want to set the float, that's this move X parameter, see the 0 here, to whatever our movement in X, which is up here. Remember, we're grabbing a value here and it's going to go between 0 and 1. We're going to put that value inside of here. So as long as this is kind of true, and what we're saying here is if move X is greater than 0, we're going to go to actually walk left should be less than 0. Because if you recall, when we select our knight here and we go left, we want the value goes less than 0. It becomes negative. If that value here is move X is less than 0, that means that we want to play we're going to transition to this walk left here. Now, something else that we want to do is we want to have a Boolean value called isMoving. And what that's going to do is that's going to help us to check if we have any kind of value here that's greater than 0. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to turn on a Boolean value, I'm going to add a Boolean parameter, I'm going to check that as isMoving. And so what I can do here is I can click this and I can add another parameter and say, hey, if we have any kind of movement that's greater than 0, that means we are moving, and I'm going to put this, I'm going to select that parameter is moving, and I'm going to set that to true. That means that is true, and this is going to get checked on. So I'm going to press play right now, and I'm going to push the left mouse button, and notice as I push that left mouse button, it turns on. See that? Now, What about movement on the y-axis, right? So it says we have this variable here called move y. So I'm going to add another parameter here, and it's going to be a float. And I'm going to name that move y. Move y. And it looks like I started moving this around. And that means we're going up, right? We're doing a walk up. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to make a transition here. And I'm going to say, select this. And I'm going to add this condition. And I'm going to say move y. And as long as move y is greater than 0, because moving up vertically is positive, right? And as we push that W, we're moving our character up positively. I want it to go here. Now I'm going to right click and make a transition back here. And I'm not going to give this any parameter. And the reason for that is I'm going to turn off has exit time. Actually, let me leave that on just to show you. I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to right click and make a transition back. What that means is once it's done with whatever it's doing, it's going to loop back. So I'm going to press play. Now you can see my character's moving up. And once I remove my key, it goes down. Now here's the thing. Because we left has exit time ticked, it's going to play that entire animation and my hand is off of the W key. I want it to stop immediately. So I'm going to uncheck as I'm going to each one has exit time. And now when I press play, if I go to the left and I release it, it's going to stop immediately. So I push up and it doesn't have to wait. And that whole animation's a bit slow now that I think about it. I also want to turn this off so it's poppier, where I go to settings here. See this transition duration? I'm going to make that 0. And I'm going to make that 0 here too. And that should make it super poppy where I just kind of release it. Actually, let's turn off fixed duration too. We don't need that then. And we might have to speed up our animations. And the same thing here. If I'm walking left, I want to make a transition here. And that transition is if I'm moving in the x-axis, which means really I'm pushing the A and D key and it's greater than 0, I'm going to play this animation for walking left. Let's kind of move this all out here. And for this walk animation here, I might make the speed. I can make it twice as fast here. Same thing here. I can just really speed those up. Yeah, so you can see now it's a little bit more poppier. And it goes back to my idle state. All right, let's grab our walk down. And walk back. And I want to turn off has exit time, fixed duration 0. Make a transition here. And I'm walking left. If move X is less than 0, I think I messed this one up. Yeah, if move X is less than 0, we want to go left. We should just put this over here. And we'll have our walk right here. Make a transition here. Fixed duration has exit time 0. And we want to move on the x-axis. If it is greater than 0, we want to be walking right. Same thing here, make transition. And move X is greater than 0. Yeah, and then these are all off, zeroed out. And then we want to make sure that we're idling. Here, we're going right, which is positive. It's greater than 0. We transition back. And I'm going to add some code right now. So let's go ahead and save this. Okay, so let's see, I'm walking down. That's not playing. I don't know if that, here's it, right. And it goes back. Okay, let's do walk down. What's going on with you here? Oh, there's no empty. So if move Y is less than 0, we're going to play this walk down animation. There we go. Now, the blend tree that we're going to make in the other video, and it looks like, oh, we need to get back to idle. And let's see, I'm going to press play here. I'm going to push down. Okay, let's add the parameter here. And what we're going to say here is, because remember, move x, so is moving, is that Boolean value is set if we have any kind of value that's greater than 0 on our movement here. So if the magnitude of our thing is greater than 0, so really what that happens is, watch this. So I press play and I move to the left. You see it's always checking is moving. So really we could just say, hey, I want to go back to idle here if is moving is false. That means we're not moving. And I'll just do that for all of my going back to idle states. As I'm going back to idle, is moving is false. And that's why it's not going back to idle as quickly. And I got to make sure that all of these are set to 0. So we just go back immediately. Oh, you know what is moving is kind of poppy. So we'll say that, and we'll do is moving is set to oh, it has to be set to false. False. And false is moving is false. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. Now once I remove it, it immediately goes back to idle. All right, cool. Let's save that. Now, what I want to take care of in the last part of this section is I want to flip that so that our character looks to the right. Actually, what I can do is I could probably go and grab the sprite renderer from here and then just hit flip X. And now when I do that, my character will look like they're going to the right. All right, so inside of here, let's go ahead and add a reference to our sprite renderer. And then I'm going to do sprite renderer here. And I'm going to grab this sprite renderer component because it is a child. See, remember our player movement script is up here. It's up here, and we want to grab the child, which is right here, and then we want to flip that X. And then in our update method, we'll add some code here. All right, so here what we're doing is if our movement.x, remember, is less than 0, we're going positive, and so we want to make sure that this flip X is set to true. If it's moving in, if it's less than X, that means we're moving in the one direction. If it's less, then we're going to set it to false. I think I did that right. So let's go ahead and zero this out, and let's save this. And this is in my update method, by the way. And all we're doing is we're just turning on this toggle based on the movement. So I'm going to press play here. So now when I'm walking right, and I walk, it felt kind of weird. Go ahead and just change this to false because we're going negative. And then this should be true. Okay, there we go. Sorry. All right, let's press play here. And there we go. The thing is, though, if we're going left and we push up, I guess that doesn't look bad. I don't know if we want to just play this going up and down. Anyway, this is actually like kind of a, this is not the optimal way. You're going to learn the optimal way, but this is a good way of getting introduced to animation states and these transitions. And we'll do a much more advanced professional version of this, but this is an awesome way of prototyping it out. So if you need to, on your own games, do something quick, this is a great way of doing it.